بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله عليه سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن عظيمك برحمتك ورحمتك. First, I like to mention a hadith about significance of knowledge, and then inshallah we start with the discussion about self-purification. This is the way we also used to do the first course. The late Allama Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar, in the first volume, he has a chapter called مذاكرة العلم ومجالسة العلماء والحضور في مجالس العلم وذم مخالطة الجهال. This is chapter 4 of the section on aql, intellect, ilm, knowledge, and jahl, ignorance. So chapter 4 is about this. مذاكرة العلم, discussing knowledge. ومجالسة العلماء, sitting with ulama. والحضور في مجالس العلم, attending sessions of knowledge, and ذم مخالطة الجهال, and blame for those who mix with the ignorant people. So the first hadith, this is Bihar al-Anwar volume 1 page 198. Allama Majlisi mentions this hadith from Amali of Sheikh Saduq. You know, Amali is the title for several books. You know, we have Amali Sheikh Saduq, Sheikh Mufid, Sayyid al-Murtada. Amali is the plural form for Imla. Imla means dictation. So these ulama used to have sessions in which they were reading hadith and their students were writing down hadith, because it was very important to read hadith that you have received through your masters, you know, generation by generation. So Sheikh Saduq in his Amali has mentioned this hadith. Hadith is from Rasulullah. Anas ibn Malik says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم المؤمن إذا مات وترك ورقة واحدة عليها علم. When a believer dies, if he dies while he has left one page on which there is knowledge, means you have written, or maybe it's not your own also, for example, you know, writing. Maybe you have written a hadith. Maybe you have written a piece of advice you received from someone. So, one page of knowledge you leave behind. Something that people can benefit, can learn. Al-mu'minu idha mata. A believer, if he dies, وَتَرَكَ وَرَقَةً وَاحِدًا, and leaves a piece of paper عَلَيْهَا عِلْمٌ, on which there is knowledge, تَكُونُ تِلْكَ الْوَرَقَةِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ سِتْرًا فِي مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ النَّارِ. This page would be a barrier between him and fire. It's a piece of paper in dunya which can be burnt quickly, but because of this knowledge it will not be burnt, and indeed it will protect you against the hellfire. وَأَعْطَاهُ اللَّهُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى بِكُلِّ حَرْفٍ مَكْتُوبًا عَلَيْهَا. Allah will give him for every letter which is written مدينة, a town, أوسع من الدنيا 7 مرات, which is bigger than dunya 7 times. Because the whole dunya is material. And something material, even if you multiply it, can never be compared to something which is spiritual. For example, if someone says, what is the value of an accepted salat? Can you say the value by using money? For example, 1 million pounds, 1 trillion pounds. You cannot compare the two. Yeah? Because money cannot give the value of something which is spiritual. So, if you want to compare, which is not possible, but you must think of something 7 times bigger than this dunya. It means that you cannot compare. And this is for every letter. وَمَا مِن مُؤْمِنٍ يَقْعُدُ سَاعَةً عِنْدَ الْعَالِمِ. There is no moment who sits 1 hour, but not necessarily 60 minutes, hour, sa'a means a portion of time. Maybe at that time, they didn't use sa'a in the sense that we use today, 60 minutes, It's a portion of time. مَا مِن مُؤْمِنٍ يَقْعُدُ سَاعَةً عِنْدَ الْعَالِمِ. There is no mu'min who sits sometime, I'll say 1 hour, but means sometime, next to an alim, إِلَّا نَادَاهُ رَبُّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. Except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would call him, جَلَسْتَ إِلَى حَبِيبِ. You sat next to my friend, the one that I love. If people have been sitting, I don't know, watching, film or, doing things that may not be haram, but not that's what useful, you prefer to sit with my friend. Jalasta ila habibi wa izzati wa jalali. By my dignity and glory. Allah doesn't need to swear, but He says, wa izzati wa jalali. It's very important. La uskinannaka al-jannah ma'ahu. In some version, la askantuka al-jannah ma'ahu. Doesn't make difference. I am going to make you sit with him in heaven, wala ubali, and I don't care. What are people going to say? What have you done? I am going to make you be with him. La uskinannaka al-jannata ma'ahu wala ubali. So this is the significance of knowledge, the significance of sitting with ulama and learning and leaving behind something which is useful. This is a very beautiful hadith. Midadul ulama afdal min dima' ash-shuhada. The ink that ulama use to write something is more privileged and more important than the blood of the martyrs. Why? Because if ulama are not there, then we would never have martyrs. People will be misguided. If there are martyrs, it's because of the teachings of ulama, because of the guidance we have received from our ulama. So, midadul ulama afdal min dima' ash-shuhada. Of course, then we have ulama who are also martyred. So they have the ink of alim and the blood of alim, then that's special, like Ayatollah Mutahari, Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. So these are very special people. Now let us go to our discussion about self-purification. Till the books become ready, if you like, you can learn a paper. I am introducing to you several papers. The first paper is the significance of self-control and self-purification. This is a paper that I have written, it's based on a course I had, and it is published in Message of Thaqalain. So if you go to messageofthaqalain.com or to shomali.net, or you just Google it, you should be able to find it. The significance of self-control and self-purification. First, we start with self-control. One of the big differences between religious spirituality, whether it's Islamic or Christian or Jewish, even to some extent, Buddhist spirituality, Hindu spirituality, all these types of religious spirituality, one difference that they have with the liberal culture is that the liberal culture tells you should be able to do whatever you like, do whatever you wish. Just be careful not to, for example, violate someone else's rights, because then you will get into trouble, for example. Just observe the laws and regulations, but even if you are clever, for example, in their concept, and you can even do things that you like with violating the rights of people, or for example, law without being for example, found guilty, there is no problem. You can just enjoy yourself. The main thing is to enjoy yourself. But in all these types of spiritualities, they say you can never achieve anything by doing whatever you like. You have to have some kind of self-control. You should be thinking first what is useful for you, for your long-term happiness, for your spirituality, or if they are divine religions like Islam, Christianity, something that is useful for your relation with God, something that is useful for your eternal life, and do it. So therefore, for us, this concept of self-control is very important. We don't do anything unless we are sure that it is good for us. We don't want just to enjoy ourselves. Okay? This is very beautifully mentioned in the Quran, in the verses 40 and 41 of chapter 79. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. The one who fears to stand in the presence of his Lord, خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ, he is worried when he thinks that one day he has to stand before God and be answerable. وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى, and forbids his own soul from its whims, from his lusts and appetites. These people, فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى, for them paradise is the abode. So, نَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى means self-control. You prohibit your soul going after what the soul likes to do. Like a teacher who says to the students that there are certain things that you shouldn't do. Like a father or mother that says to the children that there are certain things that you shouldn't do. The same is with your own soul. You should be teaching your soul. You should be educating and disciplining your soul. Your soul also should be educated and trained. You cannot say to your soul, do whatever you like. So this is very important. In Akhirah, when inshallah you go to heaven, Because then there is heavenly atmosphere and your soul is a heavenly soul. فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِيهِ الْأَنفُسِ. Whatever your soul wants, you will get it. But that is a heavenly soul and heavenly atmosphere, because your soul never wants something bad there. Yeah? But in dunya, we cannot say whatever you like, you will be able to do it. In chapter 38, verse 26, Allah said, Prophet Dawood, ala nabiyyina wa alayhi salam, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard, fahkum bayna an-nas bil haqq, wa la tattabi' al-hawa. O Dawood, we have appointed you as our vicegerent on the earth. So judge between people or rule among the people. Fahkum can mean judge and can mean rule. Fahkum bayna an-nas bil haqq. Judge among the people according to the truth, truthfully. Wala tattabi' al-hawa. Don't follow the whims of your soul. Why? Because if you do so, فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, it will lead you astray from Allah's path. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَضِلُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ بِمَا نَسُوا يَوْمَ الْحِسَابِ. Those who go astray from the path of God, they will have severe punishment because they have forgotten the day of judgment. And we have this in other places. In the paper you find another verse also. So, we have to be careful. We cannot do whatever we like. I have to also warn myself and you about a very, destructive step of shaitan that we sometimes follow. When you are a child, or when you are new to Islam, when you are not very learned, you know what is to be done, what is not to be done, and you try to observe. And even if you are weak, at least you blame yourself that I did something wrong. I cannot stand, for example, against my temptations. But unfortunately, when you become more learned, and sometimes you think you are learned, but you are not really learned. But anyway, when you learn some of the tactics, okay, then what you do is that first you try to give a justification to that bad thing, and then you do it without feeling any problem. Okay? So those who are new to Islam, for example, you see sometimes, because they are very honest and sincere, they observe all the things exactly as they are supposed to do. But sometimes you see those who are Muslim, especially those who have, for example, knowledge, sometimes some ulama, some teachers, I don't know. Sometimes you see they learn some techniques to rationalize what they want to do. For example, they say, there is no problem to tell lies here, because, for example, lie here is for some maslaha, They are deceiving themselves, because that is not something that everyone can decide. It's very narrowly defined where telling a lie can be justified in fiqh. But these people, unfortunately, play with things. So they try to play with everything. So we have to be very careful not to play with Islamic, rulings. Then we become like Ashabu Sabt, the people of Saturday, Sabbath. Yeah? What they did if you look at it from a legal perspective, was fine. Because they were supposed not to fish on Saturday. And they didn't fish on Saturday. Yeah? They made some, kind of like pools, and fish was going to the pool on Friday. And then they kept it, or did something that they cannot go out, and then took them out on Sunday. So they didn't do anything wrong on Saturday. So literally, they respected the law, but they worked against the spirit of the law. And this is the problem of some religious people, especially if you have some knowledge or some education, sometimes you misuse. So you see that these people are doing exactly the same thing that other people are doing. But other people are feeling at least bad. They blame themselves, but these people don't feel bad at all. They are very happy, This is a shaitani and satanic, step. We have to be careful. Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, in a very beautiful saying about a brother in faith that he had. This khutbah, it's not khutbah, it's a kalimat al-qisar, it's a wise saying. But perhaps Imam said this as a speech, I don't know. But in Nahj al-Balagha is wise saying number 289. He says, "Kana li fima madha akhun fillah." In the past, I had a brother in faith, a brother in God. Commentators say maybe he's referring to the Prophet, maybe he's referring to Abu Zar. They don't know to whom he is exactly referring, but must be a very special person. He said, in the past I had a brother in God, a brother in faith. كَانَ يُعْظِمُهُ فِي عَيْنِ سَقَرُ الدُّنْيَا فِي عَيْنِهِ. What was making him great in my eyes was that dunya was too little in his eyes. Because dunya was not significant for him, so he became very significant for me. Because every person is to be given the value of what is valuable for him. What is my value? My value is understandable when you know what is important for me. If, for example, I am a person that never tell lies if people give me £100, if give me £1,000, but I may tell lies if people give me £10,000. So what does it mean? It means that my value was less than £10,000, because with £10,000 you could buy me. If you give me £1 million and I don't do anything wrong, so my value is more than £1 million. Okay? So everything's value is based on what is important for him. Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam says, وَاللَّهِ لَوْ أُعْطِيتُ الْأَقَالِيمَ السَّبْعَ وَمَا تَحْتَ أَفْلَاكِهَا أَلَا أَنْ أَعْصِيَ اللَّهَ فِي نَمْلَةٍ أَسْلُبُهَا جَلْبَ شَعِيرَةٍ مَا فَعَلْتُ. By Allah, if you give me all the 7 continents and whatever is between them and the sky, to take the peel of a barley from the mouth of an ant, I don't do it. It means that my value is more than this whole universe. We have hadith which says, أَلَا وَإِنَّ ثَمَنَ أَبْدَانِكُمْ الْجَنَّةِ. The cost of your body is heaven. Don't sell it cheaper. With your body, you should be able to reach heaven. Don't sell it cheaper. And Ayatollah Jawadi Amoli says very beautifully that this is the price of your body. The price of your soul is even more. So you should be only in the very high level of heaven, in Jannati, the Jannah of God. So Amir al-Mu'minin says, this brother of mine was very significant for me, very great for me. Why? Because dunya was not important for him. Dunya was not great in his eyes. So it means that his value was more than dunya. Okay? One of the things Imam says, we don't have time to discuss all these wise saying. One of the things that is relevant to our discussion is, Imam Ali salam says, and this is something that we can use, a technique. Kana idha badahahu amran. When he was faced with two options, sometimes you know what you are supposed to do, that's no problem. But sometimes you don't know. So, this brother, when he was faced with two options and he had to make a decision, it was not 100% clear which one is right, which one is wrong. So he had to use a technique. The technique that he was using was this. يَنْظُرُ أَيُّهُمَا أَقْرَبُ إِلَى الْهَوَى. He was trying to find out which option is closer to the whims of the soul, to the lusts of the soul, to the lower desires. So you have two options. He was trying to find out which one is the one that his soul enjoys more. فَيُخَالِفَهُ, and then do the opposite. Okay? For example, someone says, let us go and visit this ill person in the hospital. Another person, let's go shopping. So, maybe I don't know which one to go. So, look at your soul. Which one is the one that you enjoy more? And do the opposite. Of course, there are people that they are so much used to doing good things that then, even in their soul, they would not have any, temptation towards doing the one which is less, virtuous. So these people don't have to use this technique because they already know what they are supposed to do. But people who are not in that level, this is a good thing. Unfortunately, many times, we choose the one which is more comfortable, more convenient, more enjoyable. Yeah? We normally go to that option. Absolutely. So, but we should, for example, there is a majlis or there is a lecture, you can watch it online, you can go physically there if you have option. Sometimes you don't have any option of going because you are ill or you don't have, transportation, or you have to look after children, I don't know. But if you have option, okay, which one is easier? To sit at home and watch it online. But here you have to be worried. Maybe because this is easier and more comfortable, you are preferring that. So you do the opposite. Go to the mosque. Sometimes we bring excuses, we say, if I sit at home, I can focus, there is no distraction, and also, people, don't ask me questions, and also it's more, pure, because no one knows I'm lecturing, there is no riyah, and also, for example, okay, I go in the mosque, I spend half an hour, for example, for lecture, but half an hour going, half an hour coming, 1 hour I am losing, sitting at home. So you see, all these justifications is only to do what you find it easy. So we have to be very careful not to go after what is enjoyable just because it is enjoyable, or what is easy just because it is easy. So self-control is very important. Then we have another technique here in the paper I have mentioned in this paper. Maybe you find it useful. Sometimes you are faced with a situation in which you have few options and you don't know what to do. for example, a person offers, I don't know, a kind of work job to you. Or a person, for example, says, you know, let's go to this place, you know, let's go to that trip. So sometimes you don't know what to do. Or sometimes more complicated. For example, sometimes you don't know what position to take about some issue in the community, in the family, all this. Another technique which is useful is try to imagine that a person that you are sure about his piety or her piety was put in this situation. Okay? For example, I don't know what to do with my mother-in-law, for example, or I don't know, mother-in-law of my daughter or my son or whatever. Here, many times, we just do what is enjoyable for us, to get rid of our anger, to satisfy our anger, you know, for example, you know. But this is not good. Imagine that, for example, a holy person, a very pious person, that you trust, was in this situation. Okay? For example, I don't know, if there is an alim, I don't know, a family member, someone that you really know is pious and wise. Imagine if he was in this position, or she was in this position, what was he or she doing? In many cases, this helps to understand what I should do. Because when you have an image of a person who is pious, and you know many things about him, your mind automatically produces a model of that person, a kind of assimilation. And then you can use that assimilated model to give answer to you when you don't know what you are supposed to do.
It's a more objective approach.
Yes. Maybe it cannot solve all the problems, but many, many times it solves the problem. Because many times our problem is that we are attached to this problem. You know, sometimes maybe I have a problem with my wife for many years and I don't know what to do, or I think I know what to do, but I'm not really doing this a good thing. But if this problem, or even more complicated problem like this, is mentioned by another person to me, I can give him the right answer. I'm not able to solve my easy problems, but I can give good guidance to other people when they have more difficult problems. Why? Because when I look at their problem, I am not involved. Yeah? So I am seeing this problem between two parties. Here it's easier to understand what I am supposed to do. But when it is between me and another person, it's very difficult. This is why in the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, insaf is very much, you know, stressed on and emphasized on. Insaf, to be fair between you and someone else. There is a hadith which says, Sayyidul A'mal, the masters of actions, the best of the actions are three. One of them is insaf. Insaful nas min nafsih. To be fair between you and people. How many times, for the sake of Allah, just think how many times you were able to say to people that you were wrong. And they were right. You know, every day we make tens of judgments. How many times you were able to say that you were the one who was guilty and then acknowledge this? It's very rare. There are people that never accept that they made mistake. There are people who rarely accept. Why everyone thinks that he is right all the time or most of the time?
Lack of humility.
Pardon?
Lack of humility.
Yes, lack of humility, lack of fairness. we are not able to put ourselves in the position of the other person and look at the case objectively. I mean that, and I really mean this, that one of the most important qualities of a mu'min must be this. That if you have a problem with a mu'min, you should be able to tell him frankly what is the problem, and if he really is, the one who is responsible and guilty, he would accept. Says, yes, you are right, without feeling any problem. But this is very rare quality, that people are able to accept that they have made mistake. So, this assimilation that I mentioned, that you imagine that a pious person or a holy person, a pious person can be an ordinary mu'min, a holy, like for example Lady Fatima, Lady Zainab, but sometimes for us it's very difficult to imagine them, because they are very high, Sometimes we can. But at least a good follower of Lady Fatima, if she was in my position, what would she do? And many times you would realize that what that person is doing is different from what you are doing. So, we need to control ourselves. We need to think before doing something. We are not free in the sense that we do whatever we like without being in need of answering. We are to be responsible. You know the story of that person that, Bishr Hafi, that Imam Kazim alayhi salam went to the door of Bishr Hafi because the voice of haram music and singing was coming, and knocked the door, and the person who was the servant of him came out, and Imam said, is the owner of this house, the landlord, the house lord, is free or a servant or a slave, abd? He said, of course he is free. Imam said, and this is why he is doing these things. So we are not free in that sense, that we do whatever we want. We will have to be always doing something when we have a good way to justify. In other words, you have to first make your answer ready. When Allah asks you why you did this, why you said this, and then do it and say it. Yeah? It's like when you work in a company. If you are the owner of the company and you don't need to answer to anyone and give report to anyone, okay, you are free. You make decisions. But if you have to always give report to a higher person, so before doing anything you are thinking of what I am going to answer if they ask me why you did this, why you didn't do that. A mu'min is always thinking of the rationale behind doing something and saying something, and then does it. Even hadith says every aqil must be like this, that for example he first thinks and then he speaks. But unfortunately many times we say something and then we think about it. I say something, then I say, was it good or not? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. This shows that we didn't think properly before saying something. And there are people who never think even after saying something. They never think before and they never think after. So they don't regret because they never think about what they have said. There are people better, they think about what they have said, but this is not also enough. We should think before saying. So self-control is very important, very fundamental. And then self-purification. Let me give you this example. If you have a child, and you are a father, mother, or you have a student, you are a teacher, you cannot just control the child or the student. Control is important. But in addition to controlling, so for example, say, don't go outside the house, don't go, I don't know, outside the classroom, okay? Don't, for example, burn, okay. So you control. But to control is the first step. After you control the person, then you try to educate that person, to train that person. Yeah? You cannot just control. Or another example, is when, for example, someone is taming. Imagine a wild horse. If you want to tame the horse, first you have to control the horse by putting him in a surrounded space. But then, if you leave it there, few days or few weeks or even few months, it's not going to become a tamed horse. Certain disciplines and practices are needed to change that from wild to domestic. Our soul is like this. Our soul, after being stopped and prohibited from going to wrong directions, has to be changed. This nafs ammare, the soul which commands to do bad things, has to be changed into the soul which at least blames when you do something wrong. This is nafs al-lawwama. Because in Quran we have la uqsimu bin nafs al-lawwama. So, if we have been able to succeed, at least after doing something bad, we should blame ourselves. We find guilty, we find that I did something wrong. And then we continue this, and then our soul is transformed. Then we have nafs mutma'innah. No bad temptations, no bad pressure coming from inside. It's completely at your control. Then your soul enjoys only doing good things. Initially enjoys doing bad things, so you have to stop, you have to work on it, and then you have a soul which only enjoys doing good things. Sometimes you have a student, for example, when you are, for example, in the primary school, it's difficult to control them. They want to go out, they want to play, they want to fight, they want to throw things. Okay, you control them. But if you are a good teacher, after a few months, then you don't need to always pressurize them. After a few months, they by themselves should be able to appreciate that they are in a classroom and they want to learn, they enjoy learning. And if one of them makes noise and wants to distract, say, no, we are here for a study. When we go out, we can play. This is very important. Sometimes I feel that we have this problem in our madrasas, that when it comes to salat, we just try to control and not educate people about salat. So you see that a person has been to madrasa for many years, still at the time of salat, someone has to stand there and say, be quiet, watch them. I think this shows a failure in our education. Yes, for the one who is new to madrasa, you need this. But after a few months, they should be willing to go for salat. The main sign of success in running a madrasa is how much they love salat. Not how much they have attended class or how many exams they have passed. So, if after a few months or even sometime after a few years, you have to be there so that they pray, it means that we have failed. Still we are in the state of controlling, not in the state of educating and not in the state of transformation. So, this is very important that after control, we try to purify ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Shams, which is chapter 91. You know, this surah starts with lots of qasam, yeah, swearing. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. Allah swears by 11 things. And then Allah says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. After mentioning all these things, there must be something very important that Allah wants to mention. Yeah? He swears by all these things. The message is very important. What is the message? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. The one who has purified his soul is the one who has achieved happiness, salvation. Him who made it pure has achieved happiness. But وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. But the one who has polluted his soul, who has neglected in purification, then قَدْ خَابَ. He is disappointed, he has failed. خَابَ. So purification of the soul is the most important thing that we have to do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mission. There are few things mentioned about the mission of the Prophet, but among his major tasks was tazkiyatun nafs. You know, in Surah Jum'ah, this is mentioned. And also in Surah Baqarah, this is mentioned. In several, actually in 4 places this is mentioned. 3 times in the form of a statement, and once in the form of dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. For example, in Surah Jum'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. Allah says, Allah has sent to the people who are Ummi. Ummi either means they are from Mecca, from Ummul Qura, or means they are illiterate. Rasulan minhum, a messenger from themselves. Yatlu alayhim ayateh, he recites to them the Quranic verses. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and purifies them. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ, and teach them the book and wisdom. From this we can understand that there are 3 steps. One is to teach people how to read the Quran, how to understand the Quran. Yet, this is the state of tilawah. The Prophet was teaching to them the Quranic verses. You know, because many of you are teachers, so if I want to use this for teaching model, so the first stage is to make them familiar with the linguistic aspect of the Quran, with the text of the Quran. Yatlu alayhim ayat. The Prophet was reading the Quranic verses to them. In our case, we have to teach them how to read and understand the meaning of the text. But وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. But then he was purifying them. And then after purifying them, he was again teaching them the book. But this is the meaning of the book, not just the text of the book. This is the spirit of the Quran, the reality of the Quran, the light of the Quran, wal hikmah, and wisdom. So, people who come to our madrasa or to our hawza, okay, what should they achieve at the end? At the end, we should have wise people who have hikmah and they know the Quran in depth. Not only theoretical, they know the light of the Quran. They know the message of the Quran for human life. Because there are people, maybe even they can teach Quran or tafsir, they can write books about Quran and tafsir, but still they don't have the light of the Quran.
Yes.
Imam Sadiq alayhi salam told to someone, I don't want to mention the name of the person, that Allah has not given you even one letter of the book. Even one letter of the Quran you have not been given. And this person is a person who has millions of followers. So, this is important. The real meaning of the Quran, the light of the Quran. So, tazkiyah, purification of the soul is very important. We shouldn't stop just in the state of tilawah, just in the state of being busy with the text. We have to learn the text, how to read, how to interpret, how to translate, but then move on to the purification of the soul. Because Quran is not a book for reading for the sake of reading. Reading for the sake of getting on board, absorbing. Yeah? We shouldn't be happy that just we read. Reading Quran is very important. I'm not against reading, but I'm saying reading for the sake of what? Implementation. You don't read just the name of the medicine. Say, okay, I read it, in 10 different languages. As long as you don't take the medicine, it's not going to help you that much. In Surah Baqarah also, هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. This was chapter 62, verse 2. Surah Baqarah is also there, but I have to find for you the reference. Or maybe later you can find. Just search for Yuzakihim. It's also in Surah Baqarah, Surah Jum'ah, chapter also 62, verse 2. And also, yes, Surah Baqarah, verse 151. So, Surah Jum'ah, verse 2, Surah Al Imran, verse 164, Surah Baqarah, verse 151. So, 3 places. This is a statement. Surah Jum'ah, Baqarah, Al Imran, a statement. But in the case of dua, is Surah Baqarah, verses 127 to 129, dua of Ibrahim. Prophet Ibrahim, when was building or restoring Kaaba with Ismail, he made some dua. One of the dua was وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ رَسُولًا مِنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Okay? So, this dua was answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in those 3 chapters that we said, Surah Baqarah, Al Imran, Jum'ah, Allah indeed says that He has accepted the dua by sending the Prophet to the people and taught them the book, wisdom, purified them, recited the Quranic verses. The only difference is that in the dua of Ibrahim and Ismail, purification came last. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. But in those 3 cases that Allah says as a statement, purification comes before teaching the book and wisdom. So it means that you have to first purify people, then you can teach them wisdom and the book. Okay? So, Purification is very important. Tazkiyatun nafs. To make the soul pure, clean. How does Rasulullah purify people? Rasulullah cannot purify people without people wanting that. You know, you can clean someone's body even if that person doesn't want. Imagine you have a child who doesn't want to go to take shower. Maybe you can force and clean him. Yeah? Even if there is an adult, few people can take and put in the water and wash him.